The rain hammered against the tinted windows of the black town car as it pulled up outside Holbrook Tower, and inside the glass-walled office on the 40th floor, a decision was about to be made that would haunt one man for years, though he did not know it yet. Marcus Doyle, CEO of Holbrook Enterprises, glanced at his watch, irritated. He had a board meeting in 20 minutes, and standing before him, soaked to the bone, was an old man in a threadbare jacket, clutching a folder of damp papers, asking for nothing more than a chance to keep his job. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories that remind us of our shared humanity, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to Hope and Wisdom, because what happens next will stay with you long after this video ends. The old man's name was Thomas Reyes. For 11 years he had tended the garden surrounding Holbrook Tower, coaxing roses from stubborn soil, trimming hedges into perfect geometry, arriving before sunrise so the grounds would look pristine by the time executives walked in with their coffee and their ambitions. But budget cuts were budget cuts, and outsourcing was cheaper, and Marcus had signed off on eliminating the groundskeeping department without a second thought. Thomas had come not to beg, but to ask if there was any other position, maintenance, cleaning, anything, because he had a granddaughter to raise and rent that would not wait. Marcus, hardened by years of boardroom battles and a childhood that had taught him softness was a liability, looked at the folder Thomas held out and did not take it. "I'm sorry," he said, though he did not sound sorry at all. "The decision's final. Security will show you out." And with that, he turned back to his desk, already forgetting the man's face. Thomas nodded slowly, the kind of nod that carries decades of swallowed pride, and turned to leave. But as he did, the folder slipped from his trembling hands, and its contents scattered across the polished marble floor, old photographs, yellowed at the edges, precious in a way office papers never were. Marcus, more out of impatience than kindness, bent down to help gather them, wanting the old man out of his office as quickly as possible. That was when he saw it. A photograph of a young boy standing in a garden, laughing, missing his front teeth, held aloft on the shoulders of a man with kind eyes and calloused hands. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He knew that garden. He knew that boy. He was looking at himself, 30 years younger, and the man beneath him was not a stranger, it was his own father, who had died when Marcus was only 9 years old, a groundskeeper himself, at a small estate 200 miles from where they now stood. His hands began to shake as he turned the photograph over, and there, in faded pencil, was written, T. Reyes and Little Marcus, Summer of Gardens, before everything changed. Marcus looked up at Thomas, whose eyes had welled with tears he was too proud to let fall. "You knew my father," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded. "I worked beside him for 6 years at the Ashford estate. He talked about you every single day. Said you had his hands and your mother's stubbornness. When he passed, I promised myself I'd plant something beautiful wherever I worked, in his memory. I didn't know it was you all these years. I never asked your first name at the top, just Mr. Doyle, sir, like everyone else does." The office, once cold and sterile, suddenly felt suffocating with the weight of everything Marcus had buried, the funeral he barely remembered, the years of clawing his way up so no one could ever again tell him he wasn't enough, the armor he had built so thick that he had just fired the one living connection to his father's memory without even blinking. Marcus sank into the chair across from Thomas, not as a CEO, but as a boy who had lost his father far too soon. He asked, almost desperately, for Thomas to tell him everything, what his father was like at work, whether he laughed often, whether he ever spoke of his son with pride. And Thomas, seeing not an executive but a grieving child hidden inside a grown man's suit, spoke for nearly an hour, painting a picture of a father Marcus had almost forgotten, a man who used to say that a garden, like a life, needed patience, sunlight, and someone willing to get their hands dirty for something they loved. By the time Thomas finished, Marcus was quietly crying, unashamed for the first time in longer than he could remember. That afternoon, the board meeting was postponed. Marcus personally walked Thomas back to the garden, now half uprooted by the outsourcing crew, and gave an order that stunned every employee watching, full restoration of the groundskeeping department, Thomas reinstated not as an employee, but as Director of Grounds and Legacy, a newly created position with triple his former salary. But more than the title, more than the money, Marcus asked Thomas if he would help him plant something new near the entrance, a garden in memory of a man named Reynaldo Doyle, the father Marcus had lost, the father Thomas had never forgotten. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your own thoughts, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness always finds its way back to us. Months later, visitors to Holbrook Tower would pause by the entrance, drawn to a small garden bursting with color, roses climbing a modest wooden trellis, a bronze plaque at its base. And before we close today, if you have a minute, please type "hope" in the comments below. It means more than you know, and it helps this story reach someone who might need it most today. The plaque read simply, "For Reynaldo, who taught us that what we plant with love always finds its way home." And every morning, an old man and the CEO who once turned him away could be found there together, hands in the soil, tending something far more lasting than any boardroom deal, a bond neither of them would ever let go of again.